Welcome to my recipe for pinto bean mushroom burgers. We're going to start with the buns. I'm making this the same way as my whole wheat sandwich bread recipe, but I'm changing how the bread is shaped for the buns. So we're going to start with a quarter cup of milk. I use dry milk, so that was that mixture there. Then I'm going to add a cup of water into that container. Microwave it a bit. You want it to be 105 to 115 degrees, but my thermometer decided to break. It was definitely not 41 degrees. That is fridge temperature. So I just assumed it was correct. It was warm-ish. It wasn't too hot to kill the yeast. Pour that into the mixing bowl, and then you're going to use 3 tablespoons of honey. That is, if you're using one of those kind of measuring cups, between 1/8 and 1/4 cup is 3 tablespoons. And the honey needed to be microwaved a tiny bit to get all of it out. And then I also had to fill it up with a little bit extra honey from a new container. So I'm glad I didn't run out of that like I ran out of molasses last time I used that. And I am rushing through the bun recipe because I've already made this bread before and I don't want to waste a lot of time with that for people who've seen it. Throw the honey in with the milk and water, add 1 packet of yeast, and then stir it up a tiny bit, otherwise it will not foam, and let it stand for 10 minutes until 5 to 10 minutes actually, until the yeast gets foamy. So the yeast is now pretty foamy, and we're going to continue adding the wheat, the flour, I mean. Then go ahead and add 3 tablespoons of butter. I could have added margarine to make it more vegan, but since there's honey in it, I figured what was the point. And then you're going to add 1 1/4 teaspoons of salt, and then 3 cups of flour, and I'm using whole wheat flour. I'm pretty sure this recipe works with all-purpose flour exactly the same. Stir that stuff all together. So I ended up with what looks like a tiny bit of used soap of butter because of the way the hook stirred it. The butter was not softened. I guess you need to soften it. That's not part of my recipe, but even if it were, I almost always forget to take the butter out of the fridge and soften it. So I'm going to throw it in there again and let it amalgamate, I hope that's the right word, with the rest of the ingredients. So this is what the dough looks like when it's done. It was a bit sticky for my taste, but I threw a little bit of extra flour when I was rolling and it solved the problem. Take a very large bowl, spray it with some kind of non-stick oil, whatever you prefer. Throw the dough into the bowl and then turn the dough once so that the oiled part that touched the bottom of the bowl is now facing you. Oxygen is getting to it. I don't really know what the point is of turning the dough, except that maybe it cooks more evenly if there's oil on all sides, and that's kind of what you're doing when you turn it. It didn't seem to be I don't know, because you still have to roll it later, so who really knows what the point of that is? I'm sure some of you chefs actually do know, and I'm just the only idiot who's doing things that are in the instructions but don't actually know why I'm doing it. Take a kitchen towel and soak it in warm water from the sink. You do want it to be pretty warm. Then wring it out, throw it in a warm location for an hour to rise. I usually preheat the oven for a few seconds and then turn it off. So there's the dough after it rose an hour. It usually doubles in size. And then we're going to roll it out onto the counter, and I guess it's really kneading it. which I'll show you in a second how to do. So I learned recently that kneading dough is a very specific movement of smashing it in one direction, folding it a quarter, and then smashing and folding, turning it a quarter, smashing it in the same direction and folding. I don't know why. And again, I'm just doing things. I don't know why I'm doing them. Because someone else said that that was how you do it, but that's how we all live our lives, isn't it? One reason I decided to make the buns instead of buying some was because I didn't have a lot of room in my freezer, and because I had a lot of yeast to use up. Sorry, I have weird reasons for making ingredients that most people, or making things from scratch that most people would buy. So here I'm going to weigh the dough to figure out how much each bun should weigh. I'm going to make 8 burgers because that's normal. And then I weighed the whole thing, divided that number by 8, and came up with like 97, I think that's grams. And kind of, I mean, I'm not going to show you all of them, but I didn't do everyone exactly the same size, but I kind of did it pretty close to the same size. If you like this recipe, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps my channel out, and honestly, I really enjoy seeing all the new subscribers. I'm about at 500 at the time that I'm making this. I have low self-esteem, and it really makes me feel good. That's not a joke. I really do have really bad self-esteem. So I found out from watching another video how to make buns, and I thought I would just roll it into a circle, but apparently you're supposed to tuck the top of it underneath and then keep turning it and tucking it. I don't think that did anything. Then I covered the dough with another hot towel and let that rise for, I actually don't remember how long it is, 30 minutes. So I was a little disappointed with the shape of the buns. They're not very big. I mean, they're wide, but they're not very bun-like and tall. But we're going to go ahead and bake them at 350 for 40 minutes because of the color of my pan. I'll have the other times in the description below. And then you have to let them cool in the pan for like 20 minutes, and then you can cut them. One reason I made the buns out of my sandwich bread recipe was because I didn't want to have to look for another recipe, and also because I'm not above eating burgers and hot dogs with sandwich bread. Like, I figured if it came out tasting like sandwich bread, who cares? So now we're going to make the burgers themselves. We're going to take 1 clove of garlic and mince that, and then it says 1 small white or yellow onion dice, and I think I did like, is that a half of an onion that I'm doing? Yeah, it looks like about approximately half of full-sized onion. Mince that up or dice that up, and then you'll throw it in a skillet. I use a non-stick skillet. I don't know if it actually matters. It says to put 1 tablespoon of cooking oil in the skillet. I don't think you actually need to worry about the oil quantity for this recipe because it listed way too little in my opinion. So I would just spray it with non-stick spray if you've got that. So the reason I decided to make these pinto bean mushroom burgers was 2 reasons. 1, a friend of mine gave me mushrooms I needed to use up. And 2, I have been wanting to find more pinto bean recipes, and this was a good option. So I'm taking 1 tablespoon of canola oil, and I'm going to cook the garlic in that for a couple minutes. And then I'm going to throw in the onions. The recipe says to saute this for 3 to 5 minutes until the onions are soft. Now I have 8 ounces of mushrooms that I'm chopping. The recipe said 3/4 cup of mushrooms, and I was like, that's not a quantity of mushroom people actually keep. People buy a package of mushrooms and then it comes in ounces. So I don't like recipes like that. So I don't know what 3/4 cup of mushrooms is. I wasn't gonna chop a bunch of mushrooms and measure them out hoping I had the right amount. I just put all my mushrooms in. The recipe also calls for green onions, which I don't have and I'm not interested in buying, so I figured what the hell. So add the mushrooms, and if you're using green onions, add that to the skillet and let it cook. It also says to put cumin in the recipe, which I'm not remembering that I recorded, although I'm pretty sure I actually used it. A half teaspoon is what it says. Now we're going to take our pinto beans and smash them down. You need the equivalent of 1 can, which is a 15-ounce can in the US. And in order to do that, I took 3/4 cup of dried pinto beans and cooked that. I always mention in my recipes where I cook my own beans that I soak them overnight, then I drained that bean water, filled the pot up with fresh water, and cooked it in fresh water. If you cook beans in bean water, it causes more flatulence. Now comes the egg replacer. The recipe gave a few options. My favorite one is cornstarch and water because I've got cornstarch and it's cheap. And any other egg replacer is pretty much not that common. So 1 tablespoon of cornstarch with 3 tablespoons of water, and then whisk it together, and then add it to your food. So throw that in the beans and mix that a bit. I'm adding this to a bigger bowl because there's a lot more mixing to happen soon. Then add the mushrooms and vegetables to the large bowl with beans, and you're going to stir that well and season. Add salt to taste and pepper to taste, and 1 teaspoon of parsley if you have it. I do not have any black pepper left. I'm throwing in this Creole seasoning because it makes everything taste better. And my husband came through with black pepper. He had purchased some on Amazon, I think. He buys a special pepper blend. So he refilled the pepper mill for me. And then the recipe says to form your burgers into patties. And I was like, it's awfully wet. This is not going to stay in a patty shape. So then I grabbed 2/3 cup of breadcrumbs, same amount as my black bean burgers recipe because I'm making the same amount of burgers. I don't actually know if it's the same quantity of food, but I said 2/3 cup of that. There was literally no flour substitute thing in this recipe, so I don't know how they form into burgers. I'm very doubtful that they do. You can use oat flour, you can use almond flour, you can use probably chickpea flour, or even if you wanted to turn some pinto beans into flour, I bet you could use that and have it taste very good. And this formed a very nice patty. You can see the difference, how much better it is. I got 8 very good sized patties, which is probably more food than the black bean burger recipe because that one I followed exactly, and the recipe creator said that it makes 4 patties, although I make 8. This one does make slightly bigger patties because I guess because I added an ingredient of the breadcrumbs. So it says to put 2 tablespoons of oil in the pan, but that was not enough, so I just poured a bunch. Um, let it cook for a while, pay attention to it, flip it when it gets brown, and I'm not going to show you all the other patties because it's pretty much the same thing. This was how dark I got mine on both sides, and I really think it came out good. Um, as far as how much oil you need, I would say make sure you have half a cup, but you probably don't need quite that much. So I did not film putting the condiments on except for the pickles. I forgot to press record, which happens all the time. But this is the making of the burger. Another reason I made this was because the black bean burger recipe is so popular. This was very good. Even the weird bread was very good. But my husband said he prefers the black bean burgers. So try this. Tell me what you think. I really love to hear from you guys. And happy eating!